Tonight, the $300 billion submarine pact makes waves in China and Victoria's bid for a piece of the action. A second breastfeeding mum booted from the county court during a show of solidarity. Joffa Korf's victim hits out at the DPP's decision not to appeal the pedophile's suspended sentence. A man clinging to life in hospital with serious burns, his neighbour under arrest. The Australian share market takes a dive, sparked by the collapse of 3 American banks. And MCG Turf declared match fit for 300,000 fans across round 1 of AFL action.
This is Melbourne's 9 News with Peter Hitchener.
Good evening. Shoulder to shoulder with the US President and British Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese has signed a deal to buy and eventually build nuclear-powered submarines. Billed as our greatest advancement in military power, it'll cost $368 billion. Here's Charles Croucher.
Old allies enter a new era.
It's an unusual name, AUKUS, but it's a powerful entity.
In the shadows of a submarine and looking over the Pacific towards China, British precision mixing with American flair.
The USS Missouri, can you hear us?
The ceremony watched by hundreds on deck, hundreds of millions around the world.
The AUKUS agreement we confirm here in San Diego represents the biggest single investment in Australia's defence capability in all of our history.
Phase 1 of the program is underway. US submarines visiting Australian ports and Australian submariners embedding at sea with the US Navy. From 2026, they'll be joined by British subs. And from 2027, a permanent rotation of US and British submarines based out of HMAS Stirling in Perth.
In fact, as we speak, the nuclear-powered sub USS Asheville is making a port call in Perth.
From the early 2030s, Phase 2 begins with Australia purchasing at least 3 Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines, while in the latter part of the decade, the first new SSN AUKUS will be produced in Britain for the Royal Navy, combining technology and manufacturing from all 3 countries.
We'll provide the world-leading design and build the first of these new boats.
And from 2040, Australian-made AUKUS-class submarines will join our own fleet. 8 in total will be made in Adelaide and based in Perth and a yet-to-be-determined East Coast port, potentially Port Kembla south of Sydney or Moreton Bay near Brisbane.
Our agreement unlocks a set of transformative opportunities for jobs and engineers, scientists, technicians, submariners, administrators and tradespeople.
It is the largest and certainly most expensive deal in Australia's military history, securing not just the alliance, but our place as a Pacific power for generations to come.
We're putting ourselves in the strongest possible position to navigate the challenges of today and tomorrow together.
It's a start for Australia, obviously, because the US is sharing our most sensitive technology.
The program will cost 0.15% of GDP, estimated at least $250 billion, but up to $368 billion over the life of the program, including at least $5 billion for each US-made Virginia-class submarine, $8 billion upgrading HMAS Stirling in Perth, $6.5 billion to extend the life of the Collins-class until 2040, and a $3 billion contribution to US and British manufacturing.
It is an investment that we cannot afford not to make.
We have to make sure that there is transparency and honesty with the Australian people about the cost involved in AUKUS.
The announcement in response to a rising China and bound to get a rise from Beijing.
We have spoken loudly with a fairly small stick. We need to speak more softly and with a bigger stick.
This sends a clear message that if you want to do harm to Australians, you're going to get a bloody nose.
Australia tonight set to join an exclusive club. Only 6 other nations have nuclear-powered submarines, and never before has the US been willing to sell its subs.
Mr. President, why did you choose Australia as a partner?
You're very reliable.
There we have heard from China tonight. The envoy to the United Nations, saying that this promotes an arms race and actually hurts peace and stability in the region. That is somewhat to be expected. All eyes now on our nearer neighbours, some of those Pacific partners that were caught off guard by this announcement 18 months ago. The Prime Minister tonight is preparing to fly to Fiji. He will meet one-on-one with Fiji's new Prime Minister in an attempt to assure him of the motivations behind this decision. As that all plays out as part of a huge diplomatic effort, there is another problem for the government to contemplate, and that is what to do with any nuclear waste that comes from this project. Tonight we're hearing defence land or defence estate will be used. However, that is a decision for well into the future.
Charles Croucher. The transition from Australia's ageing Collins-class submarines to one of the most advanced war machines on the planet will catapult our Navy into a new era of defence. Damien Ryan explains.
Everything about the new Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarine is superior to the Collins. For starters, it's a lot longer, at 115 metres, and it has a crew of 135, 3 times more than the Collins. But what puts the Virginia ahead of the game is speed. The Collins would take 10 days to travel from Perth to Sydney. The Virginia could do it in 3. And then there are the undersea capabilities. The Virginia is quieter and can stay submerged for several months at a time, while the Collins class has to surface more frequently to recharge its batteries. The US sub is also fitted with state-of-the-art stealth technology, which enables the boat to operate undetected in hostile environments. A silent but lethal weapon of war, hailed as the biggest leap in our military capability in history.
And Daniel Andrews is hoping Victoria gets a piece of the AUKUS action. Heidi Murphy's at Fisherman's Bend. Heidi, what is our likely involvement?
Well, Pete, unlike Western and South Australia, Victoria has no ship or submarine building capacity. The Premier is instead pointing to the recent air show at Avalon, where companies like Boeing had some high-end defence technology on display. He says that is where the local strength of the industry is now, and that is where he is hoping Victoria will be able to play a part in the massive AUKUS deal.
The centre of advanced manufacturing in our nation is right here in Melbourne, and I would be staggered if there was not a pretty significant role for us to play in the supply chain, particularly at the more advanced end.
The Premier says he will wait to see the detail of the deal, and while nothing has been locked in yet, he does appear confident there will be at least some work coming Victoria's way eventually. Pete.
Heidi Murphy reporting. A second mother has been asked to leave the county court after attempting to breastfeed her baby. She was one of a group of mums protesting on the steps today in support of a woman ejected last week. Penelope Learsh has more.
The county court deals with horrific crimes. Today it was home to mothers ready to plead their case.
Breastfeeding is protected by law. Wherever mother and baby can be together, they can actually breastfeed together.
Peter Brunel is a former lawyer and mum to 5-month-old Tilly. She took her into Judge Gamble's courtroom and began feeding to show support for another mum asked to leave last week.
If that had been me in the first few weeks of having Tilly, I would be, absolutely heartbroken. And I just really felt for this woman and felt that it was important to make a stand.
But when Tilly became unsettled, she faced the same fate.
Both lawyers felt that the presence of the baby in the courtroom and breastfeeding would be a distraction, and on that basis the judge ejected me from the courtroom.
Eating, drinking and using mobile phones is not permitted inside court. Whether someone has to leave is at the judge's discretion. The county court has declined to comment on both incidents. While Judge Gamble has been heavily criticised, lawyers say it comes down to protecting the justice process.
If it was any one of us and we were charged with an offence, we would want to make sure the jury's paying full attention, and the judge himself can be criticised then for not properly controlling his courtroom. So there's a lot at stake.
But Peter says it's about more than one courtroom and one judge.
For example, in the court there, they have a baby room which doesn't even have a chair. So if you're looking to feed your baby in this courtroom, where do you go?
So many mothers every day are shamed for doing this.
Penelope Learsh, 9 News.
A man in his 70s has become the third person to die from a mosquito-borne disease in Victoria's north. The Campaspe Shire resident lost his life earlier this month after becoming infected with Murray Valley encephalitis. People in areas of high mosquito activity are being urged to use repellent and remove stagnant water from around their homes. Victoria's top prosecutor will not appeal the sentence given to Jeffrey Joffa Korf for sexually abusing a 14-year-old boy. Crime reporter Lana Murphy is here. Lana, it means the convicted pedophile won't spend a day in prison.
Not one, Pete, and that is despite admitting that he groomed and lured a schoolboy to his home in Coburg before sexually assaulting him in a bedroom. For that, Jeffrey Korf was sentenced to 12 months in prison but wholly suspended, which essentially means as long as he doesn't reoffend, he doesn't serve any time behind bars. Now, suspended sentences are now abolished in Victoria, but they were common practice back in 2005 when this offending occurred. And that's how County Court Judge Mullally had to treat the matter. Korf's victim says that is completely unjust. Alex Case is now a 32-year-old man, Pete. He was hopeful the Office of Public Prosecutions would appeal. Tonight he says he's disappointed and extremely concerned about the message this sends to other victims. The community expects people who commit violent crimes to go to prison, regardless of when that happened, he told me. Suspended sentences are no longer available for good reason. The least victims should expect to get out of this process is closure. Now, Pete, it's also worth noting that even the revelation that one of the character references used to support Korf was misleading, that still was not enough to prompt an appeal here.
Okay, thank you, Lana Murphy, for that report. Two men have been charged after a group of women were terrorised on a houseboat on the Murray River. Up to 11 intruders harassed those on board the vessel at Echuca over the weekend. Some are accused of urinating on their possessions and issuing death threats. Both men are facing counts of intimidation. Arson and explosives detectives are investigating a serious assault that's left a man with severe burns. Mimi Becker tells us he was found with critical injuries at a property outside Daylesford.
Loaded into an air ambulance, a man is in the fight of his life. Loved ones forced to watch after an ugly dispute.
I never really thought that would be something that would happen. It's quite a shock.
Police were called to the Wallaby Road property at Wheatsheaf just outside of Daylesford around 10:30 this morning. A man in his 60s had been severely burnt, while officers arrested a 59-year-old man at the property next door.
He don't want to talk to anyone. Yeah, that's sometimes very friendly, sometimes they don't talk to you.
He was such a nice guy, you know, he was quiet, but he really kept to himself. We sort of, kept close and sort of worried to see what's happened with him.
Firefighters were called in to put out a small blaze. 9 News understands police and arson detectives are investigating if a subcontractor may have been attacked while clearing trees from a property. Crime scene tape was placed around heavy machinery.
Well, everyone sort of knows each other. It's definitely going to be, a bit of a shock that in this small community something so big could have happened.
And Pete, the man in his 60s was flown here to the Alfred Hospital to receive specialised burns treatment. Tonight, he remains in a critical condition. Police are still working to uncover exactly what led to this incident and how an argument could escalate so dangerously. Tonight, we understand the man in police custody is assisting them with their inquiries. Pete?
Thank you, Mimi Becker. Residents in Melbourne's southeast were put on alert this afternoon as toxic smoke spewed from a Springvale house. Asbestos was found when flames tore through a weatherboard home on McLeod Street just after midday. A smoke warning was issued for surrounding suburbs including Clayton, Mulgrave and Noble Park, and the blaze is being treated as suspicious. Fears are growing a financial crisis could develop as more American banks collapse. Despite efforts by the President to calm the market, a fourth is now on life support, rattling the Australian markets. Chris Kohler has the latest.
Customers line up at the headquarters of Silicon Valley Bank, now fairly confident they'll get their money back, but furious banks are failing them once again.
The officers should go to jail for a few months because as far as I'm concerned, they basically committed a crime.
A run on deposits caused this bank to collapse late last week, and now they're falling like dominoes. The first to crash was Silvergate Capital. $1.5 billion in the red pushed it into voluntary liquidation. Then Silicon Valley Bank went into receivership, its shares plummeting 60%. Signature Bank followed, and now fears First Republic will be next.
Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe.
Guarantees quickly put in place by President Joe Biden following the worst collapse since the GFC.
Your deposits will be there when you need them.
But panic had already sparked on Wall Street and ignited around the world. Financial stocks tumbling on UK and Japanese markets, and our own ASX 200 lost close to $90 billion in 3 days, leaving analysts to weigh the impacts.
If a bank in the US is cracking like this, it will spread.
That said, banks aren't the major concern in Australia right now. The risk is more around household spending and how much longer people can cope with rising interest rates.
They're the ones that are having to make very hard decisions at the table about what to pay for this month.
Different types of strain, but pressure is building. Chris Kohler, 9 News.
Two-time premiership-winning cat Max Rook is spearheading a class action against the AFL over concussion-related injuries across his 10-year career. More than 60 former players have joined the case, seeking compensation for financial loss and medical expenses incurred as a result of repeated head knocks.
These players need compensation, not only just to right the wrong that's been done to them, but also to assist them in paying for their own care. The most severely injured people might be looking at over $2 million plus their medical expenses.
Flag-winning Bulldog Liam Picken has also commenced legal action against the league and his former club over the treatment of his concussions. The MCG believes a record-breaking round one crowd could pack in for Thursday night's AFL season opener between Richmond and Carlton. Live to Joshua Dorr at the G tonight. Josh, the stage is all set.
Good evening, Pete. Well, I can certainly promise you the grass is greener behind those walls. I'll get to that in a second, though, because general public tickets have now sold out for Thursday night's clash between the Tigers and Blues. The MCG is still encouraging, though, AFL and MCC members. There will be space. They want them rolling in, packing in here for the return of footy. A crowd hopefully in excess of 90,000 fans. Tickets are still available for Friday night's clash between Geelong and Collingwood. A similar crowd tipped for that game. Across the 4 games that are here at the MCG in round one, up to 300,000 fans expected. But everyone's been talking about the turf, torn up, replaced after that Ed Sheeran concert. Will it be ready in time? Well, today the green carpet was rolled out for the cameras and it was a sight for sore eyes.
Testing out footy's new hallowed turf.
From what I saw last week to walking in this morning, it's absolutely looking magnificent.
The MCG's biggest makeover in almost a decade, complete in under a week. 10,000 square metres of grass replaced. Just don't expect an Ed Sheeran concert before round one again.
Maybe not. It did get a little tight. You know, when you're dealing with turf, you do get a little nervous, but look, we're ready to go, and I think the proof's now in the pudding. We can all see it. There's no sand out there. There's no mud. There's hardly a blade of grass out of place here.
It's got the tick of approval from this big tiger.
You would never know, obviously coming in here today, that there was a concert a couple of weeks ago.
Tom Lynch and his teammates will be the first to hit the fresh surface when they kick off the AFL season against the Blues. And as for safety, the stadium boss has given it the green light.
You can actually play a day later. You know, there's always speculation that the turf can move, but when you see it coming in the huge rolls, it's got reinforcement in the soil.
In 2 days' time, it's hoped the stands will face a bigger test, with a crowd tipped to push the round one record between these two sides of just over 90,000.
Just as many fans are expected for Friday night's blockbuster between Geelong and Collingwood.
I think across the weekend we could get between 280 and 300,000 fans through the gates at the MCG.
You know, they're going to enjoy this year, I think, and we're going to really need them at times, and hopefully we give them back a bit of energy.
Scoreboards loaded up and seats squeaky clean. Let the show begin. Joshua Dorr, 9 News.
Now with a look ahead to more sport, Tony Jones.
Yeah, it's all about the footy in many ways, Pete. Among our stories tonight, opening night nerves for the Cats. Why? Well, Big Tom is still no certainty to take on those Pies. Now Jez is a maybe. It's fatherhood versus football.
If nothing changes, then I'll go to the G and pull the boots on, and if the call comes at sort of half time, then that'll be a decision that has to be made then.
Also tonight, Jack spills the beans on an old teammate. Watch out, Ollie. The Bulldogs don't play until Saturday night, but already they've suffered a loss. Sam ponders a history lesson ahead of the Bombers, and there is plenty of history between these two. The young soccer star who can play for 5 countries. But has he chosen us? And JD does the sums, hoping it'll add up to another big payday, which sets the scene for another big night of sport later on.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Tony. And when Melbourne's 9 News returns, mountaintop rescue. Hikers plucked to safety after getting lost at the top of Mount Buller.
Pete, ratepayers are fighting a new bin tax that could cost them another $100 a year.
And Charles tells of his late mother's inspiration as he celebrates the Commonwealth. Two hikers who became stranded on top of a spectacular but dangerous ridge in the high country have been saved by the Victoria Police Air Wing. The South Australians were stuck on Eagles Peak at Mount Buller from Sunday night to Monday morning. They were found just before 11 a.m. in good health. A hot air balloon has made a surprise landing close to the Monash Freeway, which was teeming with morning traffic. It came down near the Ferntree Gully Road off-ramp around 8:30. The pilot said light winds forced him to bring the aircraft to the ground earlier than planned. No one was injured. A contentious new bin tax plan for the city of Yarra will be voted on tonight. Stephanie Anderson is outside Richmond Town Hall. Now, Steph, angry residents are rallying.
They have, Pete. They've all just filed inside behind me, but just a few moments ago they were on the steps. They were having their say over what opponents are calling a new bin tax, which they believe would end up costing residents about $115 extra a year over their regular rates. Now, this is an issue that's been causing a stink for a number of weeks. Tonight is the crescendo, though. This is where it's on the agenda for a vote by council. We have had a statement from a council spokesperson today, though. They're saying that council is not considering the introduction of a new tax and that the meeting tonight won't consider changes to curbside waste collection. They're also saying what they're trying to do is separate what residents pay for waste services from their general rates so that there's a bit more transparency, and that Yarra is the last council in the state to make such a move. So very different versions of events on both sides of this debate. As I say, there is quite a movement among residents. 60 of them are registered to have their say tonight. They'll each get the floor for 2 minutes each. So there's going to be some pretty passionate debate in Richmond tonight, Pete.
Certainly sounds like it. Thank you so much, Steph. Surrounded for 13 hours, a man wanted for killing a police officer and wounding another has been arrested in Missouri. A heavily armed tactical team used tear gas to smoke out the suspect and were waiting to greet the 35-year-old when he came outside. King Charles has described the inspiration he draws from his late mother during a speech to mark Commonwealth Day. Senior royals came together for a church service at Westminster Abbey ahead of his coronation. More from Jessica Millwood.
The bells of Westminster Abbey tolling to welcome the royal family. This King Charles's first Commonwealth Day service as head of the Commonwealth, receiving a traditional Maori greeting. A windy London day had Queen Consort Camilla and the Princess of Wales clutching their hats. Prince William, the newly titled Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, along with Princess Royal Anne, joining their monarch. The senior royals joining a congregation of 2,000 inside the Abbey. Dignitaries from across the Commonwealth coming together to celebrate a day held dear by the late Queen Elizabeth.
Commonwealth Day was an occasion of particular pride for my beloved mother, the late Queen. A treasured opportunity to celebrate our Commonwealth family.
At a time when the world seems so divided, this year's theme, forging a sustainable and peaceful common future.
Our commitment to peace, progress and opportunity will sustain us for many more.
A message of unity, while outside protesters had their own message. The next time we see the royal family come together at Westminster Abbey will be for the King's coronation in May. In London, Jessica Millward, 9 News.
Lavinia's along now with all the weather details. A beautiful morning, wasn't it, Lavinia?
It really was, Pete. Sunny skies and northerly breezes, so the city climbed from 16 up to 30.5. It's still very warm out, currently 29 degrees. There are a few light showers about, mostly in this line from the New South Wales border right down to West Gippsland, but they are light and they're expected to clear by around 9 p.m. The Bureau announced today that La Nina has officially ended, and while we've moved into a neutral phase, there is the chance of El Nino forming later this year, which brings the likelihood of drier and hotter conditions. And we have a dry and warm week ahead of us. I'll have the forecast for you later in the bulletin, Pete.
OK, thank you, Lavinia. Ahead in 9 News, e-scooter crackdown. Here's Neri Tai.
Pete, reckless riders have been stopped in their tracks. We hit the streets as police target alcohol and drug-affected users.
Plus, the search for a young man who vanished from a music festival. And some fast footwork saves a Donnybrook dad from a snake bite.
9 News, brought to you by BMW i, performance redefined.
Mystery surrounds the disappearance of a man last seen at the Golden Plains Music Festival yesterday morning. James Thom's family and friends are searching across the state with reports he might have been hitchhiking towards Skipton or Ararat from Meredith. Anyone with information is urged to contact police. E-scooter hoons are on notice after a spike in hospitalisations. Neri Tai's in the city this evening. Now, Neri, you've been given a look inside the operation targeting restless and reckless riders.
That's right, Pete. 9 News cameras were there when police conducted this operation targeting drug and alcohol-affected e-scooter riders. They focused their attention on very busy hotspots in the CBD because there are serious concerns. Revellers are using e-scooters to bar hop around the city. As you're about to see, the same drink driving rules apply whether you're behind the wheel of a car or riding an e-scooter.
Friday night in the CBD. And a quick dash for groceries lands this pair in hot water.
You're riding down Latrobe Street, you're two up, you can't be two up, okay? You had the helmet on, they didn't have a helmet on.
9 News was given exclusive access to the police operation.
What's happening is we're getting a lot of crashes with scooters.
Where Melbourne Highway Patrol officers targeted drug and alcohol-affected riders.
Have you had any alcohol, any drinks? You have?
A few drinks down, these international students were busted.
Do you understand that drink driving laws apply to scooters?
For using e-scooters to bar hop across the city.
We're just trying to get to one of the bars down there.
These young riders of these e-scooters may be trying to get around the fact that they're out, they're drinking, they know they can't drive a motor vehicle.
One of the men was on a learner permit, the other unlicensed, learning the hard way that the same rules apply whether you're on an e-scooter or driving a car.
If you are on a full licence, 0.05, and unlicensed, disqualified, suspended, those rules apply, so being zero.
There's been a record number of trips since the trial was launched, but cases of hospitalisation has also soared by 234%.
Serious injuries, head injuries, no helmets, footpaths running into other pedestrians.
Since the trial started, there have been 324 collisions involving e-scooters. Police have since handed out more than 1,000 infringement notices.
327 weren't wearing a helmet, 303 caught riding on a footpath, and 162 were carrying more than one person. A boys' trip also came to an abrupt end for these young Sydney-siders.
I don't want to talk to you.
If you drink and you ride these scooters, you will be caught and it is illegal.
Neri Tai, 9 News.
Not many people can say they've stepped on a venomous snake and walked away to immediately tell the tale, but a very lucky Donnybrook father can. Adam Hegarty met him.
The sound of barefoot hitting snake skin. Well, the heart-pumping reaction anyway. Oven archery with some tiptoe gymnastics over a venomous obstacle.
1.5 meters, snake. It is coming towards me. So, whoa! Stepped on it. That's a full invitation. Come and bite me. But it didn't. Thank God.
Post divine intervention, dad mode kicked in. Keeping his kids inside, braving the gauntlet again, and calling in the cavalry.
Expense at the moment is the last thing I'm worried about. Point me in the right direction, and then I spoke to Mark. He's pretty awesome.
He's something, all right.
Yeah, they're beautiful, they are, but very, very dangerous.
Mark Pelly, the snake hunter.
He's a very lucky man. I recommend he buy a lottery ticket.
Pickaxe and snake in hand. It took him 30 minutes to pull the lowland copperhead from its hiding spot, the family's Donnybrook front garden. It's now worse for wear, not that they mind.
God bless you, Mike.
I think the snake and Arvin shocked each other. Arvin ran one way, and unfortunately the snake ran the same direction too.
And therein lies the moral of this story. If you come across one, call a snake catcher and always, always keep a safe distance.
Oh! Yeah, look at it.
And, if possible, maybe don't step on it.
All I want to say is just like, it can be anywhere.
Adam Hegarty, 9 News.
When Melbourne's 9 News returns, a fairer go for Victoria, the palace push for a guaranteed slice of the GST pie. Lights, camera, action in the Burnley Tunnel as the new pacemaker system fires up. $16 a pint for Carlton Draft. Beer prices are soaring, but you can still nab a bargain. And long before the Oscars, Michelle Yeoh's special honour, right here on Swanston Street. Treasurer Tim Pallas is stepping up pressure on the Albanese government to immediately change the GST system, arguing it's unfair for Victoria. Mr Pallas wants the top-up provision, which ensures states are no worse off, to become permanent. But his federal counterpart says it won't be happening anytime soon.
When it comes to that review of the no worse off guarantee, which is still some years away, I've communicated that privately and publicly to all of my colleagues from right around Australia.
Mr Pallas has labelled the delay in reviewing the policy totally unacceptable. Those new lights aimed at easing congestion in the Burnley Tunnel have been switched on for the first time. The green LEDs flash the length of the tunnel, indicating the correct speed drivers should be travelling at. Installation cost $13 million. Panic over the US banking system continues to grip global share markets. Finance reporter Chris Kohler.
A wave of global selling dragged the Australian share market another 1.4% lower today, or almost 100 points. A handful of US banks are now on life support after billions in deposits were pulled out, and that has investors looking for the exits too. Here, the market dropped sharply at the open but regained some ground. Regional banks like Bendigo and Adelaide and Bank of Queensland faring worse than the Big Four. Telstra, supermarkets and big miners also had a rough day, but gold miners did well. The Australian dollar has spent a full week below 67 US cents and is now also below 55 British pence. But good news for anyone holding Bitcoin, its value jumped almost 10% today.
And the average price of unleaded is a touch over $1.80 in Melbourne tonight, cheapest in the inner west. Beer lovers spitting chips over the soaring cost of a basic pint, with some pubs now selling a glass for close to $16. Soaring government taxes are being blamed for the price hike. Reid Butler reports.
For these mates, a simple after-work drink is becoming a luxury.
Less beers, less frequently, less time with your mates.
Some Melbourne venues now charging as much as $15.50 for a pint of Carlton Draft, more than double the average cost of a pint 6 years ago.
Alcohol is actually one of the biggest drivers of inflation at the moment.
A meal and a beer at the pub should be within reach of people.
Bob O'Kane from the All Nations in Richmond says while inflation is hitting hard, it's the government's tax on beer hurting the most. He's had no choice but to pass it on to customers.
50 cents a pot, $1 a pint.
You'll need to pay more for a drink at the footy too. It's all because the beer excise has increased by close to 8% since August last year.
Australia has got the fourth highest beer tax in the world.
The recent rises, some of the biggest the industry has dealt with in 2 decades. The beer tax is set to increase again in August, but now there's a renewed push for the government to provide some relief.
So we've asked them to consider a cut of 50% to the beer tax rate for pub owners.
It's only a matter of time till we only have water and bread to live on.
But there are beer bargains to be had. The Oakley Junction Hotel has pints of Carlton Draft for $10.70. In the CBD, the Duke of Wellington is selling them for $11.70. But the cheapest we could find was at the Footscray Hotel, $9.50, and proud of it. Reid Butler, 9 News.
Before she took home an Oscar, Hollywood star Michelle Yeoh won hearts here in Melbourne, crowned Miss Moomba International in 1984. The Malaysian national was filmed waving to crowds as she paraded along Swanston Street during the Moomba Festival almost 40 years ago, proving she really can be everything, everywhere, all at once. Now returning with sport, Tony Jones.
Thanks, Pete. Coming up tonight, a dream come true for a young kangaroo. The cameras were there for you. Also tonight, Jeremy Cameron weighing up football and family. The Hawks and Bombers set to turn back the clocks. And the soccer star with the world at his feet. Just a few days out from their season opener with Collingwood, and Geelong is still unable to lock in a team. With Tom Hawkins in limbo following foot surgery, fellow forward Jeremy Cameron is on standby for the birth of his first child. More from Nat Ioannidis.
Pushing for selection, Tom Hawkins impressed on the track this morning as he looks to make his long-awaited return from foot surgery.
If there's one bloke that could, it'd be him.
A decision on the veteran's fitness will be made later this week. Mitch Duncan ran laps and is unlikely to face the Pies, while Jeremy Cameron is in doubt with his partner due to give birth to their first child next week, leaving the forward in an awkward position.
If nothing changes, then I'll go to the G and pull the boots on, and if the call comes at sort of half time, then that'll be a decision that has to be made then.
It could be the first time Geelong line up without Hawkins and Cameron since the former Giant joined the Cats in 2021.
We got guys that can play different roles and we can change things up. So hopefully doesn't play it that way, but if it does, it will be a little bit of a different looking forward line.
You want to be able to beat the best at their best to be the best ultimately in the end, but either way, they'll probably still have a great team in place.
Jack Crisp and Isaac Smith put their differences aside at Moonee Valley this afternoon. But come Friday, it'll be on. And former Magpie turned Cat Ollie Henry could be in the firing line.
I'm not much of a sledger. I'm more of a go about my business kind of guy, but maybe a push and shove here and there might throw him off his game.
We'll get around him for sure, but we want him to just stay focused and play his role within the team.
And a blow for the Western Bulldogs ahead of their season opener against Melbourne on Saturday night. Small forward Cody Waitman has been ruled out of that round one clash with the groin injury that has hampered him over the last month. Waitman was a late scratching for the practice match against North Melbourne, and he's no certainty to face the Saints, meaning the Bulldogs could be very tall up forward in round one. Meanwhile, North Melbourne have revealed Harry Sheasel will make his AFL debut against West Coast on Saturday. Coach Alistair Clarkson made the announcement during the team meeting today. Sheasel has impressed coaches and fans alike with strong performances over the pre-season. Tony.
All right, good on you, Nat. Thanks for that, and well done to Harry. Okay, Hawthorn coach Sam Mitchell is contemplating a round one wild card, but it's got nothing to do with selection. The Hawks face the Bombers on Sunday, a fixture that tends to produce fireworks. More from Clint Stanaway.
It's all quiet on the Hawthorn front for now. Come Sunday, one of footy's great rivalries is reignited.
Vandenberg letting lefts and rights go on the feet. Can't do that.
The coach knows all about it, but his young players might need some educating.
I'm still undecided on whether or not to make it an even bigger deal by bringing up the Hawthorn-Essendon history or just let it lie and let them research it themselves.
From that famous line in the Sand match to Dermy's bold run in '88,
Brereton's reaction was explosive.
Things always tend to get spicy when the two clubs meet, and Mitchell is happy for this current crop to get a little unsociable.
And they've all got a bit of edginess about them, and if our side can create that over the coming weeks and months and years, then that's something that the good teams have.
With Mitch Lewis still more than a month away, the Hawks are set to reward Fergus Green with a club debut. Just a few years back, the 25-year-old walked away from football in favour of full-time work. Now he'll write a new chapter.
I know when training gets really hard, Fergus is pretty regular saying, where we'd rather be, boys. We could be selling pens because obviously he was working for Artline.
There could be a debut at Tigerland as well. Young defender Tyler Young.
Since he's come in, he's worked his ass off and every session he's improved, which is great to see. So exciting for Tyler to put himself in frame for round one.
On the injury front, Jaden Short rejoined main training, but with a tick over 48 hours until the big opener, he might have left his run a little late. Clint Stanaway, 9 News.
Melbourne City duo Jordan Boss and Aidan O'Neill are in line for Socceroo duties, having been named in a 26-man squad for 2 matches against Ecuador. The first is in Sydney on March 24, then 4 days later, it's here in Melbourne. A chance for the youngsters to impress.
I was more so focused on the under-23s or like the Olyroos, but yeah, Socceroos was always at the back of my mind. I didn't really think too much of it. I was just, hoping for the under-23s call up, but then I got the Socceroos one, which is, one step better.
And what about this? 19-year-old Alexander Robertson, currently with Manchester City, is also in the squad. Aside from Australia, he's eligible to play for several countries, including England, Scotland, and his mother's birthplace, Peru.
You know, my dad and my granddad playing for the Socceroos, to be the 3rd generation, to be able to pull on that Socceroos jersey will be something special.
The Melbourne match will be staged at Marvel Stadium. The Vixens coach has urged her players to reset in pursuit of a Super Netball Premiership. They opened their 2023 campaign against the Fever, the same team they lost to in last year's grand final.
To be honest, it's not about revenge. It is, you address what happened last season. You identify where you've got to improve and what needs to be different, but it's a new year.
Bring on round 2. That's the derby between the Vixens and the Magpies. Trainer JD Hayes has thrown down the gauntlet to rival trainer Gai Waterhouse and her mount Alligator Blood, saying Mr Brightside is well placed to do something special in the Rich All-Star Mile on Saturday. And he's not the only runner Lindsay Park has in the $5 million race.
Yeah, 3 of 15. I failed maths at school, but that's a pretty good chance to hopefully get one up across the line. But our best hope is probably Mr Brightside. His first 2 runs have been outstanding.
Alligator Blood remains the warm favourite with punters. And that's all for tonight.
Righto, thank you, Tony. And Lavinia's back now. Expecting any of those showers in the city, Lavinia?
Well, there's only a very slight chance, Pete. Southeastern suburbs could get a sprinkle extending across from West Gippsland and a possible shower or 2 about the Otways. There have been a few thunderstorms over eastern districts in the past hour or so. They shouldn't be with us for too long, and I'll let you know how tomorrow is looking after the break. Hello again. Melbourne's beautiful autumn weather rolled on today. The sunshine kicked in early and with northerly winds, the temperature got on the move quickly. After dropping to a low of 16 by 10:30, the city was already a degree warmer than the monthly average and eventually peaked at 30.5. The calm and mild start to the day made it easier to get going after the long weekend. For those up early enough, the colourful sunrise provided a beautiful backdrop. Then most maximums around town started with a 3. There have been a few very light showers about the ranges, but they're expected to peter out over the next couple of hours. It's been warm and humid right across southern Victoria, with daytime temperatures mostly in the high 20s, up into the low 30s through the north. The atmosphere is quite unstable as we've got northeasterly winds that's tapping into this system from New South Wales. Thunderstorms have been sparking up through eastern districts. They've delivered a few millimetres about the ranges, so not a lot in them. They should clear by 9 p.m. There'll be a lot more cloud about the south tomorrow, and it is set to stay warm and muggy until the next change arrives late on Sunday. Before then, northern Victoria will continue to heat up. Thursday will be sunny with daytime temperatures in the low 30s and dry with plenty of sunshine and light winds on Friday ahead of a hot weekend through that part of the state. The week ahead is looking quite warm right across the country. For tomorrow, Brisbane is heading for 32 degrees with the chance of a thunderstorm later in the day. Sydney's western suburbs could get some rumbles of thunder, but partly cloudy in the city, 28 degrees. 28 in Canberra as well. Hobart should reach 24. 30 degrees on the way for Adelaide, and blue skies in Perth, a top of 31. Back home, there could be a few light isolated showers through Gippsland in the morning, dry but overcast elsewhere in the south, with minimums from 11 to 15 degrees. Ballarat will be one of the warmest, heading for 29. 23 on the way for Aireys Inlet and Warrnambool. Sunny skies and maximums in the low 30s north of the ranges. Mildura should be the warmest, 34. Here in Melbourne, there's a slight chance of a shower tonight over eastern suburbs and the Mornington Peninsula, only enough to wet the ground. Minimums will be similar to today, in the mid-teens, then mostly climbing into the mid to high 20s. Coldstream a little bit higher, 29 degrees, 23 degrees at Rosebud. On the other side of the bay, Geelong is expecting a low of 15 and a cloudy top of 25 with light winds. In the city, 26 degrees after an overnight low of 17. 26 again on Thursday, but a very different day under mostly sunny skies. 27 with a few clouds about on Friday. Becoming windy on Saturday. At the moment, 31 degrees is forecast, but it could get a couple of degrees warmer. 27 on Sunday with a late change, 21 next Monday and 24 on Tuesday. Tomorrow, we're expecting a cloudy day with light winds, a low of 17, top of 26, and the UV will be in the high range, so we'll need to slip, slop and slap.
Oh, yes, good idea. Thank you, Lavinia. And Melbourne, that's what's news this Tuesday. Ali's next with the current affair. Enjoy your evening and good night.